In this video, we will be discussing basic functions and transformations of functions. I have drawn the graphs of 9 of the most common basic functions we encounter in college algebra. These are sometimes called parent functions. We have the graph of a line, parabola, the cube function, the square root function, the cubed root function, the reciprocal function, which is 1 over x squared, 1 over x, excuse me. Then we have 1 over x squared, which gives us something that looks like a volcano. We have the absolute value function and the greatest integer function. At the bottom of your handout are examples of how we can transform the basic functions. On the left is an example of the transformation of the square root function, and on the right is an example of the transformation of the absolute value function. I would like to show you step by step how these transformation processes work. Let's start with the square root function. We have the graph of the square root function, the basic function that we start with in this example. The first transformation I would like to do is a horizontal shift. If I want to shift to the left, I have to add a number underneath the radical. Let's add 5. That will cause my graph to shift 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units to the left. For the next step, we're going to give our graph a vertical stretch. To stretch a function vertically, we have to multiply by a number larger than 1. Let's multiply by 3. That's going to stretch my graph by a factor of 3 vertically. So I'm going to send us off the charts up this way. If I want to flip this function upside down, we call that an x-axis reflection. I have to put a negative sign in front of the function. That causes it to flip upside down across the x-axis. Now we're off the chart the other way. I can also reflect it across the y-axis. So we take this graph and we flip it across the y-axis, and it is now mirrored on the other side. The way we do that is by putting a negative in front of x. That gives us a y-axis reflection. Same shape, just reflected. For our final step, we will cause it to shift down 1 unit by subtracting 1 outside the radical, and that will shift the whole thing down 1 unit. Let's look at the example of the absolute value transformation that you have on your handout. We'll start with the basic function here. F of x equals the absolute value of x. I can shift the graph to the right horizontally by subtracting a number inside the absolute value. That will shift my graph 1, 2, 3 units to the right. Keep the same shape. Now, instead of a vertical stretch, let's cause this one to have a vertical compression. We do that by multiplying by a number between 0 and 1. I'm going to multiply this graph by 1/2. That's the same thing as dividing by 2. So if I divide by 2, I'm multiplying essentially by 1/2. And notice that flattens the graph by a factor of 1/2. And then I'm going to shift this graph up vertically by adding 5. Now I could add 5 over here on the right. This time I think I'll add it over here just to show you that it doesn't matter which side we put it on. It still gives us a vertical shift. And that will shift our graph up 5 units. You can practice these transformations on graph paper, or you can practice them in your graphing calculator to see how they work.